Hi Ngozi, here is the feedback from your mock exam that you did just before Christmas. Looking at question 1, you scored the full 4 marks for it, so that's a good start with 4 marks in the bag ready. So if we move on to look at question 2 now, where you're asked to write a summary of the differences between Eddie and Henry. You start off here by saying that both sources are similar, as they're about 2 boys looking for their dad's help and attention. And then you go on to say that Eddie goes to school from home and Henry lives in the boarding school. You then go on to talk solely about source A, where you say he humorously and disrespectfully asked his dad for help doing his homework, and you've picked up on the fact that he kind of having a laugh at his dad because his dad doesn't know how to help him. You really needed to put some more quotes in there of examples of it. I mean, you just said mocking, which is actually an adjective, not a noun, but you would have needed to put a couple more quotes in there. You've then gone on to consider the second source, and you've showed some comparison by using the conjunction however, the discourse mark however, but then you've really gone into just a description of what school is like for Henry, how bad it is, and that he wants to come home for Christmas. You've not really discussed the differences between the 2 boys. If you just said that Eddie lives at home with his family in a very supportive area with all his home comforts, nice food, he's got his computer and his friend, compared to Henry, who's been living at boarding schools, not seen his dad for 2 years, and they seem to have a very cold, distant relationship, and use some quotes for that, that would have got you more marks. So if we look at the mark scheme for this question, level 1 says show simple awareness from one or both texts. Well, you've done that, but then it says offers paraphrase rather than inference. And really, you have in this section here, you have just really paraphrased what's gone on in the letter, what the letter's covering, rather than inferring how he's different, how his circumstances are different to Eddie's circumstances. You've made some quotes, but again, it's not really relevant to the question because you've gone off on a tangent, and you've made very limited statements to show differences between the texts. So I think, unfortunately, although what you've written is good, and the quotes you've used back up the points that you've made, it doesn't answer the question about discussing the differences between the 2 boys. So I can only give you the 1 out of the possible 8 marks for that question. Moving on to question 3, where you're asked to analyse the language that Henry uses to try to influence his father. You've done better in this question. Straight away you've said Henry's use of the word unhappy, and you've nominated it as an adjective, which is right, and you've used the word implies, so you're using inference, you're reading between the lines, which is good. And then further down you said the use of the verb flog. Again, so we've got the terminology and we've got the implication of the inference of him being punished. And then you said he expresses his desperation to be at home with his father. So you've given the quote, our bread is nearly black. If you'd have said that this was an adverb, then that would have been some more subject terminology. And again, you've used a good verb here, suggests it, so that's leading you to an inference that he's being served poor and his bed is stuffed with chaff. Looking at the mark scheme for level 2, it says show some understanding of language and attempts to comment on the effect of the language. So you've done that, you've certainly attempted to comment on the effect of the language. You've selected some appropriate textual detail and you've made some use of subject terminology, mainly appropriately. I think to have got up into the band 3, you would have needed to have given a couple more points, because for a 12 mark question, you need to have at least 4 points in there. I think you've got 3 really, so you could have done with at least another 1, and given a bit more detail about your inferences, and made sure you've used terminology for each case. So you could have said that he uses repetition of my dear father throughout the letter, which could be showing how much he cares about his dad and how much he misses him. But to be getting the high marks towards level 4, you could have said that this might be a deliberate ploy by Henry, because the fact that he's not seen his dad for 2 years would imply that the relationship's not that close. So the fact that he's using my dear father might be trying to get round his dad to make him think he's a lot closer than he is. You could have also mentioned the simile where he says they're more like bears than Christians, which again is trying to point out how badly treated he is, with a good use of subject terminology, and there's a lot of emotive language in where he's saying if God wills he'll be able to come, they'll see him again, where he's trying to emotionally blackmail his father, if you like, by saying if you don't see me soon then you might not see me again, because in other words this place is going to kill him. So there was a lot in there that you could have said which would have got you up to your level 3, but you've scored in the level 2 band. So if we say about 6 out of 12, which is a good score nonetheless. Okay, so moving on to question 4, where you've been asked to compare how the two writers convey their different attitudes to parenting and education. You've started off talking about source A, where you've described his dad. He's not a disciplinarian, and his feelings of his own childhood lacking, if you like, comes out. You've then moved on to look at the correct part of the source B. You've looked at the second letter, which Henry's dad has sent to the family friend Mr. Harmer, asking him to look into the allegations made by Henry. You've picked up on that he states that he disapproves of the system of education, but you would have needed to put the actual quote in there, the point that their spelling seems to have deteriorated since they left home. You've also mentioned he's concerned about them scrutinising the letters. And finally, you said he appears as a disciplined dad who takes no nonsense from his children. Now, this is a 16-mark question, so you would need to have written more here on both attitudes to parenting and education, and given some more apt quotes, because there are not many quotes in there really. If we look at the mark scheme for level 2, it says attempts to compare ideas and perspectives. Well, I think you have done that. You've mentioned the differences between the different attitudes and perspectives. One thing that you've not done really is making comment on how the writer's methods are used. So you could have said the fact that Jay uses humour and possible sarcasm or irony when he's talking about how Eddie responds to his parenting, and also when he tries to help him with his homework and the fact that he's not able to, and the fact that Henry's dad writes in a very formal, cold, distant manner to the family friend to find out about the truth of the matter from what Henry said. You have mentioned that the writer, Eddie's dad, is very subtle towards him and that he expresses his feelings. So I will class that as making some comment on the writer's method used, which means that we can allocate it into a level 2 rather than a level 1. But to have got up to the level 3, you need to be comparing ideas and perspectives in a clear and relevant way. So you need to be going into much more detail about the perspectives, and explain clearly how the writer's methods are used. So again, this is where you need to be talking about the humour, the sarcasm, the formality versus informality, and so on, to get up to that level 3 score. So I think from the level 2, because this selects some appropriate textual, makes some comment on how the writer's methods are used, it's very limited. We have to be at the bottom. So it says at the bottom of the level, student will have level 1 and at least one of the skill descriptors. So I think possibly 6 out of the 16 available marks for this question. This gives you an overall total of 17 out of 40, which, bearing in mind that this is the first time we've done a mock full paper 2, that's not a bad score. And there's clearly things that can be tweaked to improve your scores. So I think we're definitely on a good path to achieving a good grade in your GCSE. Keep up the good work. Your attendance is 100% and you've submitted every homework that I've asked of you. So you're clearly on the right lines and doing the right thing. So keep it up and I'm sure you will achieve a good grade. So well done, Ngozi.